The ocean had overtaken the streets, as if the news program's global warming simulations had finally come to pass, and the computer-generated swells mounted to drown the great metropolis. Except it was not water that flooded the grid, but the dead. It was the most mammoth convocation of their kind Mark Spitz had ever had the misfortune to see. The things were shoulder to shoulder across the entire width of the avenue, squeezed up against buildings, an abhorrent parade that writhed and palsied up Broadway until the light failed. The dam bubbled and frothed on the most famous street in the world, the dead things still proudly indicating, despite their grime and wounds and panoply of leaking orifices, the tribe to which they had belonged. In gray pinstripe suits, classic rock t-shirts, cowboy boots, dashikis, striped cashmere cardigans, fringe suede vests, plush jogging suits, what they had died in. All the misery of the world channeled through this concrete canyon, the lament into which the human race was being transformed person by person. Every race, color, and creed was represented in this congregation that funneled down the avenue, as it had been before, per the myth of this melting pot city. The city did not care for your story, the particular narrative of your reinvention. It took them all in, every immigrant in their strivings, regardless of bloodline, the identity of their homeland, the number of coins in their pocket. Nor did this plague discriminate. Your blood fell instantly or your blood held out longer, but your blood always failed in the end. This is an imagining of the destruction of New York from Colson Whitehead's novel Zone 1. Behind me is another picture of the destruction of New York from the recent Avengers movie. Actually, New York gets destroyed in every Avengers movie. In fact, analysts have recently said that the destruction in the Age of Ultron would amount to $160 billion. Long story short, people love to destroy New York, and we love to see the Big Apple destroyed. By floods and fires, plagues and neglect, zombies and aliens. In his fantastic book, The City's End, Max Page argues that New York is destroyed more frequently in film, art, and literature than any other city. On the one hand, there's the simple aesthetics of it. New York is a gorgeous city, he says. A city of steel and glass, reaching towards the sky in a decidedly 20th century American ode to modernism. However, it's not just that destruction looks better in New York. Rather, America's metropolis is a symbol of political and economic power, cultural assimilation and diversity, social prominence and wealth, the overcoming of our dependence on nature, as well as our vulnerability to it. For writers and filmmakers, readers and moviegoers, the destruction of New York is a way of working through complex social issues, as well as our fears and anxieties about them. In the passage from Whitehead's novel that I just read, Mark Spitz compares the mass of the undead to immigrants who flocked to the big city to find a better life for themselves and their families. Inherent in his narrative is the promise of the United States. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. In New York, differences are erased. The only important consideration is whether you can sink or swim. However, the passage also describes a subtle fear. Does the city strip us of our humanity, making us just so many walking dead, shuffling from work to home to overpriced cocktails on the Lower East Side? Does it encourage us to eat each other alive? New York has been described as dog eat dog, but in the world of Zone 1, it's human eat human. New York is peopled with zombies. All right, now I know what you're gonna say. You're being ridiculous. Like the overeducated academic you are, you're reading things into something that's just supposed to be entertaining. No one reads a zombie novel or goes to see the Avengers to work through their own anxieties. Well, like the overeducated academic I am, I'm going to beg to differ. Have you ever wondered why different cultures have different monsters? Or why, within the same culture, over different periods of time, our fixations change? In the world of late 19th century England, monsters like Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde dominated the public imagination, betraying a growing fear of science. In early 20th century America, a fear of the unknown, coupled with increasing technological prowess, gave us alien invasions and genetic mutants. Today, we have zombies and vampires. The first, a nod to our fear of contagion. The second, our love-hate relationship with wealth and social superiority, our strivings for eternal youth and immortality, and the dark side that they could contain. So too with our vision of apocalypse. The ways in which we portray destruction and the places we destroy both describe our preoccupations and shape the way that we see the world. Popular culture has power. Just like any discourse, it has real effects in the world. For those who are still skeptical, we need only return to the events of 9/11. New York, and specifically the World Trade Center, were targeted because they are the exact types of symbols that I described earlier. Yes, a terrorist attack has many goals: loss of life, financial disruption, but ultimately it's a symbolic act. And if one wants to strike at the heart of America, there is no better target than New York. Max Page notes in his book that the strangest thing about the attacks on 9/11 were that they were both totally unimaginable and totally familiar. We had seen this before in countless movies and video games. However, he also notes that the story of the destruction and rebirth of the city gave Americans, and specifically New Yorkers, a narrative of how to understand rebuilding, grieving, solidarity. A classic 1948 film begins with the line, "There are 8 million stories in the naked city." Well, there are just as many stories about the naked city. It captures our imagination and shapes our worldview. Research in urbanism tends to focus on material problems: transport, housing, services. It asks, how does a city work? But it is even more important to ask, what is a city for? In order to answer that question, we need to listen to the stories we tell about it.